Well, it's official. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 has devolved into nothing more than Dishonored with fangs. What was supposed to be the revival of one of the most unique Western RPGs has been reduced to a blatant cash grab, with not one but two clans, the Toreador and the Lasombra, locked behind paid Day 1 DLCs. That's not extra content, that's Paradox selling you a core aspect of the game piece by piece. And just like everything else in this tragic-comic operetta of a game development, the situation with the DLCs has already been rethought by Paradox. Not cancelled, just reconsidered. Our most esteemed providers of entertainment have merely deigned to ponder whether €20 is a befitting price for two clans in a mediocre action game when the entire far superior original Bloodlines can be bought for the same price. It's gotten so bad that even a few professional shills in the gaming media have started calling out Paradox in the Chinese room for just how nakedly predatory this DLC looks. When even the usual suspects can't spin your business model, you know you've hit rock bottom. Welcome back to Toasty Gaming, where today we'll most likely cover the slow-motion car crash of Bloodlines 2 for the last time before it limps out in October and we all quietly pretend it never existed. I've already made a fairly in-depth video breaking down why Bloodlines 2 looks like a disaster, and I'll link it here if you want a deeper dive. But today we'll keep it simple and focus on three things. First, the slap in the face that is the paid Day 1 clan DLC. Second, the developer diaries, which become comedy gold when read alongside the actual footage of the game. And finally, a quick look at the newest Grotesque design choices that prove Chinese Room should have stayed in their lane and just continued making walking simulators. So let's jump right in. Let's start out with the obvious insult, locking two clans behind a Day 1 DLC, and not some fringe oddballs either, but Toreador, the seductive artists who embody both the decadence and refinement of the Masquerade, a fan favorite since the original, and the Lasombra, the aristocrats of Shadow, longtime leaders of the Sabbat, and now, in large parts, defectors to the Camarilla. These aren't side dishes, they're two of the most favorable clans on the menu, so to speak. The Toreador are actually my personal second favorite clan right after the Children of Malkav. To put this in perspective, this isn't just as bad as a D&D CRPG locking elves and dwarves or sorcerers and clerics behind a paywall. It's actually far worse, because in Vampire the Masquerade, your clan isn't just a class pick or some random race you get to play. It's the lens through which your entire experience of the world is shaped. It defines your strengths, your weaknesses, and how the Masquerade either protects you or is a constant issue for you to maintain. It even controls your place within vampire society and whom you have realistically access to and not. Take the Malkavians, for example. Highly intelligent, disturbingly insightful, and irreparably insane. Through the fractured glass of their psyche, the truth of the world is revealed to them. Yet sadly, they are so stark raving mad with their musings that no one, including themselves, can actually understand what they're understanding right now. In Bloodlines 1, their dialogue didn't just sound eccentric, it sounded as if it was completely detached from reality in the beginning. Your Malkavian would casually refer to the ruler of Santa Monica as the daughter of Janus, or label Lacroix a jester. Cryptic titles that only reveal their full weight much later in the story. That's the brilliance of the clan. Wrapped in rambling madness, there are truths the other kindred can't see until it's much too late, and a large part of playing a Malkavian is learning to understand what your character is currently understanding from his, at first glance, insane ramblings. Or you have the Nosferatu, grotesque, shunned, unable to walk the streets without instantly breaking the Masquerade. Their playthrough was one of shadows, sewers, and constant paranoia when trying to get to Lacroix's tower. A completely different experience from, say, the Toreador, who could seduce virtually anyone, charming their way into high society and bending mortals with a glance, access to opportunities no Nosferatu could even dream of. That's the point. The clan you pick is the experience. It's your mechanics, your dialogue, your opportunities, and your restrictions. It's your entire playthrough. It's your entire position in the world and your relationship to everything else that is happening in the world of darkness, which is ultimately what made the original Bloodlines so great. The experience of playing a Malkavian was completely different from the experience of playing a Nosferatu or playing a Tremere. If Bloodlines 2 is going to be halfway decent, a massive if, your clan will also affect the resources and allies you have access to, and given you're playing as an elder vampire this time, probably even your childer. But again, that's assuming the game respects the IP enough to build around clan identity, which I severely doubt. Nonetheless, paywalling clans isn't just a greedy business model. It's amputating the spine of the game and then selling the vertebrae back to you in overpriced DLC bundles. This doesn't just show that Chinese Room and Paradox are greedy, it shows that they have no idea what type of genre or IP they're actually working with. So Paradox is trying to push through an uber predatory DLC, another piece of bad news in the seas of bad news for this game. Well, yes, but this is also where the comedy starts. In a rare moment of collective sanity, even some game journalists and redditors admitted that locking core clans behind DLC was crossing a line. Paradox, naturally horrified at its court heralds and pay cattles daring to question the order of things, responded by announcing they would, and I quote, rethink the DLC with Chinese Room. Not cancel, not backtrack, rethink, which is corporate PR language, which usually means find a different way to squeeze the same 20 euros out of you. The best part was watching how quickly the tone shifted. Within a week, the very same journals and quite a few redditors who were calling this predatory snapped back into full shill mode, the moment almighty Paradox decided to reconsider whether the cattle should be milked quite so openly. Suddenly, the whole outrage was no longer such a big issue and mostly just painted over, as though this was the biggest problem and not that the entire game looks to be in a terrible state and this DLC was just another massive slap in the face. And here's the whole punchline. Someone is going to get ripped off no matter what. Either the regular buyers who stick to the base game and end up missing 2 clans, or the intellectual titans who pre-ordered the $80 deluxe edition for the privilege of getting those 2 clans up front after having seen the gameplay and story beats we were already presented. Because if Paradox eventually caves and unlocks the clans for everyone, those deluxe buyers are left with a glorified receipt for content everyone else got anyway. And if Paradox doesn't cave, then base buyers are still short 2 clans. It's a lose-lose scenario, unless you're Paradox, in which case it's pure profit either way. Wait, no, actually not, considering that Vampire the Masquerade is rather indie and most of the core fanbase is not going to buy this, so you're probably going to lose a lot of money. Well, in that case, it's a lose-lose-lose situation. The cope gets even funnier when you look at PC Gamer, which ran with the line that the Chinese Room is maybe already working on further DLC that might be used to replace the 2 clans in the deluxe edition. Imagine thinking the studio that's barely managed to release walking simulators to a mixed reception 70% of the time is suddenly going to crank out multiple high-quality DLC tags before Bloodline 2 even limps across the finish line. And speaking as someone with an econ background, if anyone at Paradox has a shred of corporate strategy left, they are not greenlighting further DLCs for this project. This entire game is already a living, breathing case study in the sunk cost fallacy. Every euro Paradox is spending now is just an attempt to justify the last one, and anyone with an IQ above room temperature has probably figured that one out by now. The comedic story of Bloodlines 2's development doesn't stop with the entire back and forth around the DLCs. We of course also have the developer diaries. If the DLC fiasco showed Paradox doesn't respect your wallet, the devblocks prove the Chinese Room doesn't respect your brain. Take their proud entry on dialogue. It's presented as if they've reinvented the very idea of a conversation, a masterclass in nuance and strategy, empowering players to explore subtleties. What it actually amounts to is a wall of buzzwords justifying why you get paraphrased dialogue options instead of the real written out thing you're going to say. The diary goes on at length about strategies for role-playing, intimidation, honeyed lies, playing it mysterious, and paints this like a revolution. Not like every game with a dialogue wheel ever since Mass Effect, and even before had that already. But then you look at the in-game footage and the entire situation gets even worse. Your supposed strategies for conversation look roughly like what you see in this situation. Here your character has just recently woken up, having lost all of their powers, well, not all of their, but most of their powers, having a weird mark on their head, having a weird annoying voice in their head, and having been asleep for roughly a century, and your character is an elder vampire that is over 4 centuries old and therefore most likely has a lot of enemies, as everyone who knows World of Darkness to a little knows that vampires make a lot of enemies. And now you need to talk to this character. Her name is something Lu, I want to say Nefeli, but that would be wrong. And you need to get her to allow you an audience with the Prince of Seattle, which is for some reason important to you. Now, obviously, as an elder who is currently weakened, vulnerable, might be perceived as a threat, you might want to lie, maybe not directly show her that you want to see the prince, try to maneuver your way through this highly complicated field of communication between powerful vampires. But you would be wrong. Those are your supposed conversation strategies. First option, as you see in the image, tell her everything. Second option, reveal the mark, which, as I just said, was the thing that weakened you and led to the weird voice in your head most likely, etc, etc. So basically also just telling her everything. And the third one is asserting your status, which, as this is how vampire society works, will immediately get called because this Lu person knows you're not going to kill her right now, so she will challenge you, and if you can't back up your behavior, you're just going to have to give up anyways and tell her everything. Ultimately, you've just got 3 paths that lead to one destination. The strategic roleplay here is the strategic choice of which flavor of surrender to this Lu person you prefer. This is the Chinese room in a nutshell, by the way. Pages of lofty theory about player agency that amount to the illusion of choice. They dress it up with talk of emotional intelligence and layered dispositions, but under the hood it's just a looped branch written 3 times. And the tone of the diary itself is just pure self-congratulation. It reads like a grad student trying to TED Talk their way into a game design award. It's filled with terms such as subjective interpretation or fancier ones like aggregate perception, strategic approaches to roleplay, all very impressive sounding unless you've ever picked up an introductory textbook in college and read the first page. But when you actually look at the content of the game, you're just watching Lou Graham steamroll you into coughing up all the information about yourself with no option to avoid that. I can play pseudo-intellectual as well. There's a Chinese proverb that fits perfectly here. The empty vessel makes the loudest sound. Now you can figure out what is the empty vessel in our analogy. And that's the story of every Bloodlines 2 dev diary so far. Whether they're talking about combat, traversal or fashion, the pattern is always the same. A smokescreen of intellectual posturing wrapped around painfully shallow systems. Streamlined, visceral combat really means you get 4 cooldown abilities. Player expression through outfit means that you're going to wear a hoodie as a respected assassin of the Banu Hakim clan, and that you're going to look like a pimp if you play a Ventrue. Neo-Noir Seattle means John Wick lighting slapped on Unreal assets, and neither one looks as good as it should. It's all dressed up like profound insights into the world of darkness provided to you by some masterful game designers, but peel off the layer of semi-academic jargon and you find a very simple truth. They just visibly don't have anything to say at Chinese Room, and they also don't seem to be particularly competent in developing video games. And I'm not just saying that because half of their walking simulators are sitting at mostly negative on Steam. And this entire trend of pseudo-intellectual babble masking absolutely no substance is running throughout all of Bloodlines 2. It's all surface polish, zero depth, and all of it doesn't fit the setting at all. The dialogue wheel pretends to offer you choices and give you deep RPG systems like in the first game, but ultimately just funnels you into the same answer. It's worse than the dialogue wheels in Star Wars The Old Republic, and that's an MMORPG. And the exact same philosophy bleeds into every other aspect. Take the character designs that we've seen recently, for example. When you look at the clans, for example the Banu Hakim, they've been reduced from a lineage of ancient judges and assassins from the Middle East into just a guy in a hoodie and cargo bands, like some mall ninja who wandered out of some Urban Outfitters catalog. The Tremere, once occult scholars drenched in paranoia and mystery, now look like runaway models in tailored coats. The Ventrue, supposedly the aristocrats of the Camarilla, come across like some Instagram influencers from freaking Dubai, and the Lasombra, the masters of shadow politics, look like nightclub influencers with crucifix jewelry, Oh, and they're obviously also behind the DLC, so you can pay extra for the privilege of looking this ridiculous. And the gameplay? Well, it's been butchered even more since I last talked about it. Instead of any skill checks, any reason for you to level up any skills, a real inventory, meaningful restrictions on what you can do based on clans, you just get a very minimized, highly streamlined action game with no real character creation, no meaningful weapons, which is obviously a disaster if you think of Bloodlines 1, which had both ranged weapons and close quarters weapon, no humanity or frenzy to keep you on the edge, so you can just drink people to death, no hacking, no lockpicking. Admittedly, the entire hacking in Bloodlines 1 was looking for a password, but it still made you interact with the environment. And 2 of the most iconic clans paywalled. This isn't just cutting features, it's cutting the backbone of what made Bloodlines special. The tension of balancing your feeding is gone. The RPG depth that made every clan a different playthrough is gone, not just in terms of how the world reacts to you, but also in terms of what you might want to level for a functioning build. The sense of actually being in the world of darkness is obviously also gone, and your entire gameplay has been reduced to 6 clan abilities on cooldown, weapons you can pick up, shoot until the mag is empty, and then throw away. And that's basically it. Oh, well, you also got your fists. You got combat feeding, 6 clan skills, punching people with fists, and that's basically everything you can do to fight. That's your entire combat system. This has nothing to do with an actual RPG. What's left is a product that looks stylish in screenshot, not to anyone who has any idea of video games, but to some random millennial on Reddit maybe, has dialogue wheels that pretend to be clever while being worse than in the average MMORPG, and gameplay that's been stripped down to some shallow action loop, which is worse than in most action games I've seen. So where does all of this leave us? With a game that wears the Vampire the Masquerade logo like some skin suit, but underneath it's barely even a mediocre action title that desperately tries to pass itself off as something deeper. The clans, the dialogues, the mechanics, everywhere you look it's all the same pattern, all surface, pseudo-intellectual babble and no substance. The dialogue wheel pretends to offer strategy but collapses into the same choice no matter what you pick. The clans are styled like some fashion shoots from some millennial Instagram account, instead of undying immortal vampires which can be centuries old. The gameplay systems, the lifeblood of an RPG, have been gutted, leaving nothing but 6 abilities on cooldown and a cosmetic wardrobe and your dialogue wheel as options for things you can do in this game. And the entire DLC stunt, that was just the final insult, taking 2 more or less iconic clans, the Toreador are clearly iconic, the Lasombra is a different story, and chopping them out of the box to sell them back piecemeal. It's the exact opposite of what Bloodlines stood for. Yes, the original was messy, it was buggy, it was unstable, but it was alive. And when I say alive, I mean that it was such a unique game. It was an immersive sim, but it was also the only game I've ever seen that tried to be a first-person CRPG almost, in how it felt and in how it played. It tried to give you an experience as though you played the World of Darkness tabletop in its 20th anniversary edition on a computer. That was such a unique design idea that there is nothing that can compare to it, and that's what made it so legendary and unique, obviously along with a lot of other reasons, but I believe that was the core game design philosophy behind it, and you just don't see this philosophy that would create such a unique masterpiece with Bloodlines 2. Ultimately, it feels like Chinese Room just violently amputated all the parts that made the original great and then dressed up the mauled corpse in some fancy coat. At best, what's going to ship this October is going to be Dishonored with Fangs, and at best serviceable game, maybe semi-mediocre, but certainly not a Vampire the Masquerade game, and certainly not a worthy successor to Bloodlines, probably not even a decent RPG. So don't let Paradox fool you with the branding. This isn't Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, it's just another action title with a familiar logo slapped on the box. If you want Vampire, go back to the original or dive into the tabletop, at the latest into the 20th anniversary edition. Because this this is a corpse being puppeteered for one last cash grab, and we can only hope that this disaster is not going to kill the entire franchise for good. Let's wait and see what happens in October, when it's going to be Welcome to the World of Darkness, brought to you by a bunch of pretentious millennial hipsters. Thanks for watching, don't pre-order, stay skeptical, and of course, stay toasty. Cheers!